present end of a tradition that goes back at least 200 years.
This is live, by the way, this concert. We're on a traffic camera here as well. Maybe. I think it's looking this way at the moment. Sainsbury's supermarket.
It's a kind of passion. It's a relationship, but it's also an obsession. And if it were illegal, I would be in jail because there's no stopping. It's a kind of fixation, and sometimes you wish you didn't live. Sometimes I curse my fates, but at the same time, it's a staggering experience, and I don't think anything else can really give me that. If it can, I haven't found it.
Were you determined from the very beginning to banish what I might call the sober-suited vision of the organist with his black back to the audience?
Well, to answer the provenance of your question, specifically whether I was determined to banish it, I'm actually not determined to banish anything. As a matter of fact, the only organist whose image that I'm really interested in modifying is my own, and it changes all the time, so what can you do?
But there's for the benefit of those at home, I should describe you're wearing a kind of black cut-off t-shirt, and you're wearing a wonderful pair of trousers that have sparkles on the front.
By Preen of Notting Hill.
Even better, even better. But I can't remember an organist having worn such an outfit before.
Neither can I.
To be serious, though, Bach is the kind of theme that runs through both of your poems here at the album. Is Bach a very important starting point for anybody who would play the organ? Is this the kind of first building block?
It's perhaps not the first building block, because actually Bach is technically difficult enough that you want to get some things in place before you attempt it, but it's the starting place musically for a musical mind, and I think for a listener. Even though there's so much before Bach, it's such an incredible moment in human thought, and so it's indispensable. And of course, for me, that is a love relationship, although of course not a traditional relationship.
In a while, we're going to hear your own reworking of Bach's chorale prelude, Nun freut euch, lieben Christen. But this was first reworked by Busoni. How do you approach reworking, the whole business of that tradition of one organist, one musician to another?
Well, of course, it can turn into semantics very easily, that you're playing an arrangement of an arrangement of an arrangement, which is actually not my point. I mean, it's much more laborious on paper, hopefully, than musically. But the thinking there is that this music has been so important to so many of the great minds. And Busoni is another master whom I admire very much. And so he was, of course, fascinated with most of the works of Bach, and a great many of the chorale preludes, especially for organ, he arranged for piano. So it's interesting for me then to come back, having studied the original, of course, when I was in school, to then see what Busoni did on the piano, and as an ill-advised pianist myself, to attempt to play it, and then to translate that into the organ. A bit like arranging the Chopin etudes allows you to harvest on the organ the catechism of the piano, which Chopin, of course, had no intention to be put on the organ, but from which we can still gain so much from studying it at the organ. I think that's true a bit of Busoni, and it's great fun to attempt to play it.
You mentioned at the beginning of that answer that the word paper, and I wondered, do you work all these things out very carefully on paper before you come back to the organ?
Exactly. I don't always notate them before I perform them, but all of my transcriptions are notated.
We're going to hear first Bach's Prelude and Fugue in A major, and like so much of the music that you're playing today and tomorrow, it's the first time it's been played here at the Proms. Is this a piece of Bach?
I'm going to play this, I think, some other day from the BBC iPlayer, so it's not going to be on now. I'm going to shut you off again. In fact, I'm going to shut everything off this time.
Music, which is staggeringly wonderful, but
so that I'm saving battery. Okay, so I'll be back in about a quarter of an hour, all being well. Maybe a bit longer.